Hello, and welcome back to another lecture. In this lecture, we are going to create our autoscaling group using CloudFormation. Let's open our text editor to start. So I've opened my text editor, and I've also opened the CloudFormation documentation. Another thing I've done is I've opened the CloudFormation Management Console. In the CloudFormation Management Console, I've created my VPC stack, NAT gateway, RDS, and application load balancer. So once we are done with this template, we are just going to create that stack on top of it. The next thing I did is I opened the management console just to show you some examples of the resources we are going to be creating. So let's start. The first thing we are going to do is save our template. So I'm going to select File, and I'm going to select Save. I'm going to save my template as asg.yaml. Once you've entered the name for your template, select Save. And we have saved our template. The next thing we are going to do is import our sections into this template. So I'm going to go to the CloudFormation documentation. I'm going to select Working with Templates, and I'll select Template Anatomy. So by now you should get the gist. Then we'll go down, and under the YAML syntax, copy it. Then we'll come back to our CloudFormation template, right click and paste it there. Once you have pasted your sections in the template, the next thing we are going to do is remove the sections we don't need. We don't need the output sections, transform, conditions, mappings, and rule. We are going to remove those sections. I'm also going to clean up this template and remove the extra information. Once you have cleaned up your template, the first thing we are going to enter is the template version format. So in the CloudFormation documentation, if you scroll down, under format version, select it. And if you scroll down to the YAML syntax, you can see it here. It is 2010-09-09. I'm going to type it in here. The next section we are going to create is our template description. And for our template description, I'm going to enter this template creates autoscaling group. Just like we did in the previous lecture, we are going to skip the metadata section and create our perimeter section first. To create our perimeter section, download the reference template that I created for the perimeter in the description. In this reference template that I call ASG perimeters, I have included all the perimeters we need to create our autoscaling groups. So I want you to copy everything. Start at the bottom, copy everything up to here, but make sure you are not copying the perimeters. I'm going to right click, copy it, then come back to my CloudFormation template, press enter and press backspace and right click and paste it there. I'm going to minimize this. For this lecture, I have decided to try a different approach. Instead of typing the perimeters one by one like we did in the other lectures, I have decided to include all the perimeters and properties that we will use to create our autoscaling groups. But I'm going to explain what each perimeter means one by one. Please let me know if you like this approach. Like we learned in the previous lectures, the perimeter section is optional, and we are only using them to enter the values that we don't want to add code into our template. So to learn more about the perimeter sections, just come to your CloudFormation documentation. And if you select Working with Templates like we did previously, and select Template Anatomy, and just scroll down, you'll find the perimeter section here. Select it, and you can learn more about how to create a perimeter and the properties for the perimeter. Under the perimeters properties, you are going to see all the properties you can use to create a perimeter. I have only selected a few that we are using for our perimeters. So to explain our perimeters again, the first one you see, this is the logical ID or logical name, and that is something you make up yourself. Then once you make up your logical ID based on what you are trying to use it for, then you can enter some properties for it. For example, for this particular perimeter, I have description and type. If you come to the properties section, we are going to look here and you'll see description. And if I scroll down to T, you'll see type. And for each property, it is going to give you a definition of what the property is. So to explain what these perimeters are, I believe you already know this. We are going to use this perimeter to import our VPC stack. The next perimeter is the same as the VPC, but we are using this perimeter to import our application load balancer stack so we can reference some values in it. The next perimeter is to enter our email. So the email that we are going to use to notify us about our auto-scaling activity. So this is what this perimeter is for. And if I move it here, you can see it. And the next perimeter is for our Ec2 key pair. So with this perimeter, it is going to select a key pair that is in your account in that region. So make sure you have a key pair ready. And when you are launching your template, you will have the option to select that key pair. And that is what this perimeter is for. The next perimeter is the perimeter we are going to use to enter our image ID. Remember in the last course we create our image, we are going to use this perimeter to enter that image ID. We are going to use the next perimeter to enter the name for our launch template. As you can see, I've given it a default value and I've called it LAMP server launch template. And the next perimeter is to enter our instance type. So when we are creating our auto-scaling group, we need to specify our instance type, and we are going to use these perimeters for it. Like I said, the perimeter section is optional. If you don't have these perimeters in your template is still going to work, but you would have to hard code all this information into your template. So that's what we are using the perimeter section for. Now that we have entered our perimeter section, we can now create our metadata section. So for the metadata section, download the reference template that I call ASG metadata from the description, and we are going to paste the metadata in here as well. In this reference template that I call ASG metadata, copy everything in here. I'm going to start here and copy all the metadata, but make sure you don't copy the metadata. I'm going to right click and select copy, then come back to my CloudFormation template, press enter and press backspace and paste it in there. And we have pasted our metadata section, and I'm going to minimize this. Remember we discussed in the last lecture that one of the things we can use the metadata section for is to group our perimeters. And how we do that is we create a label and we'll put the perimeter in the label. So for every perimeter we have down here, we created a label up here and we have put the perimeters in them. So when we go to the CloudFormation console to create our stack, our perimeters is going to be organized according to how we have organized our label. So now let's go down. The next section we are going to create is our resource section. So download the reference template for the resource section in the description, and we are going to paste them in here. Then we can start filling in the values. In the reference template that I call ASG resources, open it, and we are going to copy all this resource. So I'll start at the bottom, copy everything. And I'm going to come back to my CloudFormation template, press enter, press backspace, and paste it there. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to fill in the values. I'm going to minimize this. The first resource we are going to create is our launch template. And remember this logical name, this is a name I made up. So for all this logical name, I made them up. You can call them whatever you want. So just to show you what our launch template is, if I go to the Ec2 console, I'll select Ec2. Remember we said before we create our auto-scaling group, we need a launch template, and launch template is here. So if I select it and select create launch template, and in here you'll find all the information you can use to create your launch template. The first one is your launch template name, and that is what we have here, launch template name. And we are going to give our launch template a name. And remember we created a parameter for it up here. We call it web server launch template name. And we are just going to use the intrinsic function to reference that parameter. And that is how you reference it. The next property we are going to enter is our image ID. In the management console, if I scroll down, you can see under Amazon machine image, here is where you can enter your AMI. We are going to be using the AMI we created in the last course, and we have created a parameter for it up here, and we are just going to reference the parameter down here. The next property we are going to enter is our instance type, and we have created a parameter for it up here. So I'm going to use the intrinsic function to reference that parameter. And if you look in the management console, you will see the instance type here. The next property is our key pair name, and that is what we have here. So I'm going to use the ref function to reference the parameter that I created for it up here. So I have the key name up here, the parameter that I created for it, and I'm just going to reference it down here. The next property is monitoring, and we have entered the value as true. So this is going to enable detailed CloudWatch monitoring on our Ec2 instance. If you don't want that, you can just remove the monitoring. The next property is the security group ID, and we are using the intrinsic function to import this value in from our VPC stack. So we export this value in our VPC, and we are importing that value in here. And we've covered this in the last lecture, so this is how you do it. And the next resource we are going to create is a notification. And this is just an SNS topic that will send an emails to us on our auto-scaling group activity. So the only thing we need to enter here is under subscription for the endpoint, we are going to reference the email we create up here. So we created a parameter for the email. It is right here, operator email. We are going to reference that parameter down here. And for protocol, it is going to be email. The next resource we are going to create is the auto-scaling group itself. So after you have created your launch template, right? Then we can come back out. And the next step is to create your auto-scaling group. Make sure you watch the auto-scaling group lecture from the last course, and you will see that all the resources we are creating here are the same resources we created in that lecture. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to select auto-scaling group. And this is the resource we are creating now. So if you select create auto-scaling group, and you start with the auto-scaling name, you pick your launch template. That is what we are creating here. And also, if you want to learn more about the resources, come to the CloudFormation documentation. I'm going to minimize this and select template reference. And if we select resource and property reference, and we are going to scroll down and select Amazon EC2 auto scaling. And you'll see the auto scaling group here. I'll select it. And if I scroll down to the YAML syntax, and you will see the resource type and all the properties you can use to create your auto scaling group. These are the same properties we are using here. Remember, we said that you don't have to use every single property. We've just picked the one we need to create our auto scaling group. The first property we are going to enter is the auto scaling group name. And I'm just going to type the name in here. And the next property is the zone identifier. The zone identifier allows you to specify the subnet that your auto scaling group is going to launch the EC2 instances. And in this case, we want to launch our EC2 in the private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. So we are using the import value intrinsic function to import those subnet in from our VPC stack. We did this in the last lecture, and this is the syntax to import the private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. The next property we are going to enter is the health check grace period, and that is going to be 300. And for the health check type, we are going to enter ELB. And again, for every resource type and properties, for example, the health check I just entered, you can find it here. The health check type, if you select it, and you can read more about it here. And you can see the valid values are EC2 and ELB. So we enter the ELB there. So everything we are entering in our template, the information is in the documentation. The next property we are going to enter is our launch template name. So for our launch template name, we are going to reference the perimeter we created for it. And for the version, this is how you enter the version for your launch template. We are going to use the get attribute intrinsic function. Then you will enter the logical name of the launch template. If I scroll up, the launch template is right here. And this is the logical name. So we will enter the name here. And type period. And the value we are trying to reference in this launch template is the latest version number. So we'll type that in here. And make sure you type it like this. And if you also go into the CloudFormation documentation and you select launch template specification here, and you can see under the YAML syntax, select launch template name. And under launch template version, you can see the latest version number we just entered here. So everything you will be building in your CloudFormation template, you will find the information in the documentation. The next property we are going to enter is the minimum size of our auto scaling group. So the minimum size, we can specify it as 1. The maximum size, we can specify it as 4. And the desired capacity, we can specify it as 2. So what this means is that at the minimum, we will have 1 web server when we are scaling down. And at the maximum, we can have 4 servers when we are scaling up. But when our auto scaling group is launching, we want 2 servers running. Then the next thing we are going to enter is our tag. So for key, I'm going to enter name. And for value, I'm going to give it a value. And for the next property, propagate at launch, we are going to enter true. So this means that do you want to add this tag to the EC2 instance that your auto scaling group is launching? And we said true, meaning we want it to add this tag to all the EC2 instance that our auto scaling group will be creating. Then we are going to scroll down. The next property we have here is our target group. and we have used the import value intrinsic function to import that target group in from our application load balancer stack. So this is the name we use to export it in our application load balancer stack, and we are importing it into our autoscaling group template. And this is how you do it. The next property we are going to enter is our notification configuration, and under the topic ARN, we are going to reference the SNS resource we created up here. You see this notification topic? We are just going to reference it down here. So in here, you use the ref function and reference that resource. And under notification types, we have listed the type of events we want to receive an email notification for about our autoscaling group activity. It is going to notify us when it is launching an EC2 instance, when there is an EC2 instance launch error, when it is terminating an EC2 instance, and when there is an EC2 instance terminate error. We are going to scroll down. The next resource we are going to create is our scaling policy. And the first scaling policy, if you remember in the last course, the first scaling policy is what we use to scale up. So you can see we call it web server scale up policy. And under the properties, the adjustment type, we have specified change in capacity. And under autoscaling group name, we are going to reference our autoscaling group resource. Under cooldown property, we are going to enter 60. And scaling adjustments, we are going to enter 1. Remember how we did it in the last course? This scaling policy will add 1 server. So that's what we want. We are going to scroll down. And the next resource we are going to create is the scale down policy. Again, under the properties, it is going to be change in capacity. Then for autoscaling group name, we are going to reference our web server autoscaling group. And for the cooldown property, it is going to be 60. And the scaling adjustment, it is going to be -1. So what this scaling policy would do is it will remove 1 server. Then we are going to scroll down. The next resource we are going to create is our alarm. Remember when we were creating our scaling policy in the last course, we created a simple policy, then we create an alarm, and when that alarm is triggered, our scaling policy would either add a server or remove a server based on what alarm we assign to it. So for this alarm, we want to add it to the scale up policy. So what we are going to do is the metric name. Remember the metric name is CPU utilization like we did in the last course. So we are going to scale up whenever our CPU is greater than 90% for 10 minutes. For the namespace, we are going to enter AWS/EC2. And for the statistic, it is going to be average. The period is going to be 300. Then for evaluation periods, it is going to be 2. For threshold, it is going to be 90. And for alarm actions, press enter and press dash. And we are going to reference our web server scale up policy. So in here, use the ref function to reference it. And under dimensions, the name is going to be autoscaling group name. And for value, we are going to reference our autoscaling group resource. And for the next property, it is going to be greater than threshold. And the last resource we are going to create is the alarm to scale down our web server. And for the alarm description, it is going to scale down if our CPU utilization is less than 70% for 10 minutes. The metric name, it is going to be CPU utilization. The namespace is going to be AWS/EC2. For the statistic, it is going to be average. And for the period, it is going to be 300. The evaluation period, it is going to be 2. The threshold, it is going to be 70. Under alarm actions, make sure you press enter and press dash. And we are going to reference our web server scale down policy. So remember, we want to scale down. So we are going to reference this resource. I'm going to go down, and under alarm action, I'm going to reference that resource. Under dimensions, the name is going to be autoscaling group name. And the value is going to be our autoscaling group resource. And for the comparison operator, it is going to be less than threshold. For the values in your template, make sure you are typing them correctly and using the capital or the lowercase the way you see them here. And I'm also going to include the reference template in the description, so you can download my reference template and compare it to yours. So we are done with this template. All we are going to do now is scroll back up, and I'm going to save it. I'll select File, and I'll select Save. Once you've saved your template, we can go back to CloudFormation console and create the stack. I'm going to maximize this. I'm going to select Create Stack with New Resource. I'm going to upload a template file, and I'm going to choose a file. And I'm going to select my ASG template, select Open. I'm going to select Next. And under stack name, I'm going to enter ASG for autoscaling group. Under parameters, for our export VPC stack name, we called it VPC. So I'll type VPC in there. And under export application load balancer stack, we call it ALB. I'll type that in there. And I'm going to enter an email address. For image ID, we want to use the AMI we created in the last course. So I'm going to open the Ec2 Console. On the dashboard, I'm going to select AMIs. And the AMI I want is the FleetCard AMI version 1. I'll just select it. That is what I called it in the last course. So select it, and the AMI ID is right here. Just click this to copy it. And we are going to come back to our CloudFormation stack and paste it in there. Then let's scroll down, and under key pair, make sure you select the key pair in your account. Then we are going to click Next and scroll down. And another thing I want to mention is, if you don't want CloudFormation to roll back the failure, for example, when it is launching your template, if something fails and you don't want it to delete all the resources it already created, this is where you disable it. So you just select Disable. So that is how you select that option. I'm going to click Next, scroll down, and click Create Stack. And it is now creating my autoscaling group stack. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to give it some time to finish creating all the resources in my template. And after waiting some time, it has successfully created all the resources in my template. You can see the events right here. Now let's open a new tab and go to the Ec2 Console. I'm going to right click, open a new tab and select Ec2. And you can see that we have two Ec2 instances running. And if I select it, and you can see the tag name we gave those Ec2 instances. And we have two Ec2 instances. One is already running and the other one is just initializing. And this is how we create auto-scaling group using CloudFormation. In the next lecture, we are going to use CloudFormation to create a record set in Route 53. Then after we do that, we should be able to access our website. If you try to access your website now, it wouldn't work. So wait till the next lecture when we create the record set in Route 53 and you'll be able to access your site. If you want to delete your CloudFormation stack for now, just go back to the CloudFormation console and select the auto-scaling group stack and select delete. And once that stack has been deleted, then you will delete your application load balancer stack. And once your application load balancer stack has been deleted, you will delete your RDS, NAT gateway, and VPC, and so on. You have to wait for the stack at the top to be deleted before you can delete the stacks below it. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye.